Happy Friday and welcome to Career Launch Live. I am your host, Katherine McCord, and we're going to have a very controversial topic today. We're going to be talking about religion in the workplace. What do we do with it? What do we do anything with it? What's going to go on with this? And what are some of the things that we need to be mindful of when we're talking about this topic? And today I have a very special guest. I was actually on his show not very long ago, and we had a brilliant conversation afterward about religion. So I had to bring him back with me today. I'm going to let him introduce himself because I think he's too cool and I don't think I can do it justice. Have at it.
Hey, how you guys doing? Thank you, Catherine, for bringing me onto your show. I
Absolutely.
often host. I don't usually get a chance to be a guest, so I appreciate that. My name is NaRon Tillman. I'm a pastor, a yoga coach, and mindfulness coach. I have two podcasts: one Walk in Victory, and others One Ministries Church. And religion is up my alley. 25 years as a preacher, um, about 15 years as a pastor, and I'm ready to discuss.
Let's do it. And actually, I real quick, I'd love it, Ron, if you would share a little bit more about the work that you've done, because when you told me, where you chose to be a minister and or how you a pastor and like kind of the audience that you chose and the home front that you chose, I thought that was really cool. So I was just wondering if you'd share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so 24, 20, I'm 48.
It's hard to
20,
remember, right? Like you get to a certain age,
yeah,
it's like, wait, when did
it's
this
hard. I
happen?
started preaching at 24. So 24 years ago when I started preaching, I was very traditional, grew up Pentecostal. So I had that as my foundation and my baseline. And we know that most of our formative training, it shapes up our adult lives. And then my life kind of shifted about 8 years ago. And I started to see through the lens of meditation and yoga. It didn't make me change perspective about the Bible. It
Right,
actually made me see the Bible in a broader way,
right,
the mind construction of the Bible and stuff like that. So I realized that sometimes the church can be traditionally segregated and segmented, which is why the name of our church is One Ministries, because we wanted to remove the segmentation, remove the limitation, and be inclusive and inviting everybody. Now, when we use the word inclusive, people automatically have a negative connotation towards that. That doesn't mean that we condone everything that everyone does. But if we look at the church, what it's supposed to be as a place of healing and a place
hmm
of acceptance and a place of unconditional love, then everyone should be welcome without being isolated or making made themselves to feel bad. We shouldn't leave church feeling worse than we
no,
when we when we
no,
came, but we should be challenged.
yes,
So we can challenge a person's lifestyle, we can challenge a person's choices without making them feel bad, without making them feel, and they will feel bad when you're challenged. You're going to be like, oh, because you're always going to say me. Oh, this person is
yeah,
picking on me. This guy is. He saw that I came in the room, and now all of a sudden he want to talk about homosexuality. He saw me
yeah.
coming in the room with my kids, and now he want to talk about single parent. So it's always going to be that fine line. But we shouldn't remove the welcome mat and beat people up because they're sinners, because we're all sinners.
And this is what I want to hit on was your topic of inclusion. So even when we disagree with, and you and I have some different views, you and I, but we both agree on the inclusion aspect and that we have
Right.
to, that the welcome mat has to be there. And that's the same thing, by the way, at work. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So I love that's why I wanted you to hit on the inclusive aspect of your church, because this is something important to remember. And by the way, for anybody out there who thinks that their religion teaches you to hate, you just heard it. That ain't it. That ain't it. Um, so I think that it's really beautiful to talk about inclusion at work because and you're right, there's this weird aggression towards that word right now. There's this very angry aggression because people are being asked to evolve and they're being asked to be kind to people with whom they disagree. And that's a very uncomfortable place for a lot of people. And from an HR perspective, um, this is something that we have to work with a lot, and I get asked about a lot is religious inclusion. So, from an HR perspective, what I like to teach is that we include, we do not inflict. Those are two very different, very, very different concepts. So I'm curious, you and I have had several, kind of off screen conversations. So if you could share a little bit about where you feel that line lies and some of the experiences you've had where it's inclusion of religion versus infliction and some of the thoughts you have along those lines.
Well, I'm gonna give an example. When we, as a Christian minister, if you're asked to pray, like I had the chance to pray over the state assembly
Hmm.
1 year, and you can't say in the name of Jesus because Jesus, that when you say that, you're excluding
Hmm.
other religions. So that's the way
Right.
that. So most people feel like, all right, I'm going to go into the state assembly and I'm going to prove to Jesus that I love him by saying okay, knowing the rule,
And then breaking it.
and then when I get up there, I'm gonna say in the name of Jesus anyway, because now I proved the point that um for Christ.
Yeah.
That doesn't prove a point because you went in with a lie.
Hmm.
What proves a point is not going.
Yeah, right. If you don't like it, then yeah, just don't go.
Then don't go. Don't go under the false sense of I'm going to comply
Mhm.
and then go. In the book of Acts, Paul was at the meeting camp. It was called Agora, and that's where most of the philosophers actually began to come into the church in the early church. And he uses a generalization. He doesn't mention Jesus' name. He uses a generalization about the culture and the religion and the historical context of what we now call Christianity. At that time was called the way followers. And he didn't isolate the people. He began to talk about, because they had a shrine and it was like this invisible God. And he was like, I know who this God is. And he gives them a historical context of who he was.
Hmm.
What and they were drawn to his intellect and they were drawn to his spirit. He didn't get up and say, you guys are wrong. You don't know.
You suck. Why are you wrong all the time? Why are you being wrong all the time? Yeah.
Yeah, your philosophy sucked.
Yeah.
He took it a different way. Yeah.
No, it doesn't work. And that's the other thing that always baffles me about this is that people think that being a jerk works. I'm like, that doesn't, nobody's ever been bullied into agreeing with you. Okay, that's not a thing. Um, and so, and we were talking just before the show about the infliction line and how there is a movement right now, um, unfortunately, to push certain religions, sadly Christianity, and I don't mean sadly that Christianity is bad. That's not what I mean. I just mean that's the group that's kind of leading the charge, um, to inflict. That's what we're going to say in school. That's what we're going to, put on our money. That's all this kind of thing, and um, and that's the opposite of helpful. To your point, it doesn't. I always get that backwards. I point the direction you are to me, and it's actually over there. um, but every show, every single one. Um, it's not about pushing your way onto people. So number one, I like that you brought up that it's about an internal thing too, folks. We don't need to inflict to get our message across. That's actually not helpful. It that goes against how the human brain works. But in the workplace, inclusion means that we support the differences of people and that they are embraced as they are, meaning as long as it doesn't harm other people, obviously. So if this person over here wants to silently pray to themselves as a Christian or say a blessing over their food, great. If a person who is Muslim wants to put out their mat and pray at the appointed time, we welcome that too. If somebody needs to take Passover off. Okay, and so on and so. And then if somebody has no beliefs at all, okay. The infliction is when we start doing like group prayers at work, or when we start, and I want to specify in a non-Christian workplace. Like if you work at a church, clearly that's okay. That's the point of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if there is a group of people that want to get together over here and do something, that's fine. But I'm talking like you're at a meeting and the manager just does it. That would be uninclusive. It is uninclusive to only allow off for Christian holidays and not for other holidays. It
Well,
is. Oh, go ahead.
I
Go
want
ahead.
I want to say, like, so I live in New York City, right? And when I was coming up in school, we had all Jewish holidays off. Yom Kippur. So when I went to the South, my family's from the South. Well, not deep South, but Virginia. I'm like, okay, y'all don't have off? I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm.
we go to school, but it's a Jewish holiday. So it was embedded in our mind, and
Mm-hmm.
it became a fabric of our culture in the city that we acknowledge the Jewish holidays and the Christian holidays. So what that opens the door to, as the city becomes, as the politicians begin to look like what the city represents, which is a melting pot of everything.
Beautiful
Now
rainbow.
the Muslim says, well, why can't the schools be closed on our holidays? The Hindu comes and says, why can't the school be closed on our holidays? The
Mm-hmm.
Buddhists say, why can't we have
Yeah.
rest on
Hey,
our holidays? So then when do the kids go to school?
so my thing is don't close, leave it open. I know, right? Leave it. And in the workplace, it's easier, right? Because there's the balance of workload. And so what you say is you are allowed X number or allotted X number of days off for whatever holidays you choose to be. And we're not closed on any particular day. It's just, you just take the time off whenever you need it. In school, that's a little bit harder because of the way that lessons are planned and that type of thing, right? That makes it a little bit harder. So I don't want to get into that. I have a friend who is an education consultant who has some good ideas on that front, but I would let her answer the one about the school. But in the workplace, that's how I like to tell people to work it is these are the days that you're allotted off, because
Yes,
there are other people that can fit in.
when we talk about inclusion in the workplace, I'm
Hmm.
going to use a football reference. There was
Like it.
I'm a Jet fan, and
Oh,
our
okay.
coaches. Yeah, I know.
It's a bad year for you. I'm sorry. It's tragic. I'm sorry. You got snake bit when Aaron Rodgers got injured. It was terrible.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
go
know.
ahead.
That's the fate of our franchise. All the sports, all of the teams I root for, but that's neither here nor there. Robert Saleh is Muslim,
Mhm.
and they have a rule where they have the minorities. So it was the intent for the rule was to um, a black and white issue,
Right.
which
Hmm.
is
A racial
is
issue.
similar to
Yes.
a religious
Hmm.
issue. Well, it was
Hmm.
just really white coaches and black coaches.
Right.
So what happens is the NFL says, we'll pay you more if you hire a minority. But when they're thinking minority, they're not thinking a Muslim
Hmm.
as a minority. So in the workplace, when we say, all right, we want religious inclusion or segmentation or separation, or we go on the floor of Congress and we say we want prayer back in schools, the person that's usually championing that is coming from a Christian context.
Hmm.
But when someone who agrees that yes, we do want prayer back in schools, and it's going to get or prayer back in the workplace. We
Right.
remove God. That's the whole thing. We remove God, and now look what's happening. So we want to bring prayer back in the workplace. Okay. So then, when is the
But
work
what
going to get
prayer?
done?
Yeah.
Because when the Christian friend is praying, now the Muslim saying, "Wait a minute, it's my turn. I want to pray. We all going to come together in this group and let me pray." And
Right.
when the Muslim finished, the Buddha said, "All right, now let's meditate." So it's
Which,
it's going to be
yay.
yeah, yeah. And everything. There was a huge movement and a lot of the new buildings in
Hmm.
Brooklyn, a lot of people don't know when they were building, and I was a part of um, helping with some of the planning. The Barclays, it was a big hotbed
Yep.
issue because it was misplacing a lot of people in that area. And at the time, I was pastoring a church in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, New York, and they have a meditation room in the Barclays Center. And the
Hmm.
reason why they have a meditation room in the Barclays Center because someone said, "Well, people, we're living in this new age, and people want to go and
Yeah.
nobody uses it
Yeah.
because it was
You know,
important to the person that it was important to the person who had a voice at the table, who was holding up a project.
right.
And these are the asks
Right.
that I want. I want us
That's
to have a
so funny.
meditation room in the Barclays Center because it's important that people, if they want to go and have some quiet time. But if you go
Yeah.
into a game, you're not thinking about quiet time. You're thinking about Bud,
Right.
right?
Right.
Dinner
Exactly.
time.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what you're thinking about. That's I just want to go watch the football, or whatever game it is. But my thing I always tell people about work is people as long as the work is done. That's why it's called reasonable accommodation, right? That's what a lot of people miss is reasonable. So, in other words, if somebody tells you that their religion is that they have to pray all day every day, that's not going to work out. That's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable thing. But if it's 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable accommodation. You can work around that. And I don't know of, I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I do not know of a religion where that's it's not reasonable like that. It's always very, and actually some religions have it specifically written into their text that you are not supposed to inconvenience others by taking time to pray. That's a big no-no. So in other words, if something's going on and it would be harmful for you to stop and pray, you're not supposed to do it. So, which is interesting. Um, but I think, keeping everything reasonable to your point, like, and that's part of inclusion, right? Compromise and being reasonable and just having the conversations. So I had a client who made a space for prayer that literally, which was so thoughtful, by the way. And it was a very generic space. Anybody could use it. It was very, literally like one person used it ever. And that was it. But it was such a thoughtful thing. It was such a thoughtful thing. So I'm not saying workplaces you need to like build, a chapel and a temple and a meditation room and all that. That's not what we're saying. just embrace letting people practice in ways that are reasonable to the workplace. And I have a very specific question for you, by the way, NaRon, because this
Okay.
this is one that I've run into quite a bit of the HR side of things. So very curious as to your thoughts about it. Um, I have had people tell me that it is against their religion to sit with or to congregate with people of different faiths. And so, what would be your advice from a pastoral and or professional? 'Cause you're both for sure. From that perspective, as to how to compromise that situation, because obviously you've still got to work with this person. How would you advise them to compromise that?
You found another job.
Sometimes
Um,
that's it. Seriously.
so yeah, no, I'm serious. When I told you I grew up Pentecostal, and
Hmm.
we used to have these group discussions, and they would indoctrinate us, and we couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't do a lot of things. And one of the scriptures that they use is like, "Do not sit in the seat of the scornful." Now, me being me, I was always me. Like, do not sit in the seat of the scornful. So I'm like, what does that mean? Every time I raise my hand, the whole class was, oh Lord, here we go. I'm like,
That was me. I was that kid in Sunday school too. I got you.
I'm like, so Pastor, we can't get on the bus because they use it to say you can't go to the movies, right? So we couldn't go to the movies because don't sit in this. All right, so we can't sit on the bus because what if the person that was before us was a sinner or scornful, or the
Hmm.
word that you're using? We can't get on the train. How can we get to church? We take a cab and the cab driver is scornful, right? So if
Yeah.
you're gonna be if you're gonna be literal and isolated, one of Jesus's charges was that he hung out with the publicans and the sinners. That was why he went to the cross. That was why he went to death. His death penalty charge was that he hung out with sinners.
Mm-hmm.
He hung out with people that didn't like him. So the religious leaders of his day went to the government and said, we want him to go up on charges. We want him to die because he hung out with sinners.
How dare he? So rude.
Right? um, and he posed the question, who's your neighbor? And he talks about a Jewish man that falls into a ditch and was beaten up and whatever, and the Samaritan man, because
Mm-hmm.
the religious people had to get to church and they overrode him, and the religious people
Mm-hmm.
didn't have time. It was a Sabbath day; they couldn't help him. And Samaritan man, who is his arch enemy, lodges him, feeds him,
Mm-hmm.
helps him out, and puts him up on his journey back, goes in and check on him and make sure that he's okay. And then he looks to his brothers and sisters. They're all cousins.
Yeah.
They're all family. That's what was lost. Like we look at Israel as a nation, but Israel is really a family. And that's
Yeah.
what the church is supposed to be. The church now is supposed to be this new family that is birthed out of this model of Israel, this family, this tribe,
Mm-hmm.
that turns into a nation and is inclusive of a melting pot. And the way that you can become an Israelite, through slavery. So Abraham's big problem was, God, all I have is slaves.
Yeah.
And in the Jewish culture, all of my possessions would go to my slave son because the slave is my son. They're not
Yeah.
slavery in the context of American slavery,
Yeah.
but slavery in the context that they worked for me, right? So the son, the male slave, the young
I'm
male
so
slave,
sorry to
it was
cut you off. I'm so sorry to cut you off. What was how is this tying? I'm so sorry, I'm getting lost. How is this tying into the
I'm about to tie
question?
it in all the way.
Okay.
I'm gonna tie it in all the way. So the youngest male slave, but they were different religions
Okay. Yeah.
and they were all inclusive.
Right.
Jesus was Jesus was hanging out with people that were sinners that was supposed to be separate from him, but he was inclusive. He
Right.
didn't say, "Oh no, you're a sinner." That's what the religions people said.
Yeah.
So he was inclusive. Abram had
Yeah.
to be inclusive. The nation had to be inclusive of
Hmm.
all religions, all melting pots, because when they came in, the way you could become a part of them is that you had to accept who they were, but they didn't make them not practice what they were.
Right.
They didn't say, I have to separate from you. They were
Right.
all co-equal. So if you're coming into workplace with a religious mindset, you have to go in the workplace with the same religious mindset of the person that you're following.
Right. What an interesting concept, right?
If you're a follower of Christ, you have to think like Christ. You have to be inclusive of everybody. If you're a follower of Abraham, you have to think like Abraham. You have to be inclusive of
Hmm.
everybody. That's
And
what
and to that, that
plain
was
and
a
simple is.
beautiful point. I'm sorry, I was just my neurodiverse brain was like going down a whole other direction, so I was just needing help. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I thought that's a beautiful point. That's a beautiful point, and I think sometimes um, that we forget that at their core, these faiths are inclusive, and I haven't read of one that's really not, honestly. And one of the most interesting things my mother did in her HR career was she was in charge of sending out different scriptures for different, because she worked at a Christian based hospital, and so she was in charge of sending out different things, and she was also working doing some work with inclusion. And so I forget the exact holiday that she did this for, but she sent out a passage and everyone replied to it and said, "Oh, that's so beautiful. That's the most beautiful psalm. Which one is that? Oh, it's so wonderful." She replied back, "It's not. It's from the Quran." And everybody was just mind blown. And the point that she was making is, do you see the similarities? Do you see the love? Do you see this? And a lot of people don't know, they know that the Quran even talks, right, it talks about Jesus. The Muslim faith has great reverence for Jesus and all this. And then with Buddhism, there's lots of time, and people don't realize that Buddhism can actually be paired with other religions because it's more of a philosophy, it's not so much a religion. And there's a lot of not understanding. And there's a lot of, I think, people putting their own egos and their own, like you said, their own mindset, right? And their own needs into their religion bubble. But really that's not it. And I feel like there's a lot of getting lost from the message, like the messages of love, the messages of helping your fellow man, the messages of just being a good human, just in general, right? And so, and to the point that you just made about the different tribes coming together and some of the different faiths coming together, it's not about you're wrong and I'm right. It's that shouldn't be the attitude. It's just coming together as human beings, realizing that we're all basically on the same mission, right? I mean, I just gave a talk about that, like the missions thing, that, you know, this side over here was worried about children's health from this perspective. This side is worried about children's health from this perspective. Everybody was worried about kids and loves kids. That was the ultimate issue. Like, that's the mission. Everybody wants to
And
help the
that's why we're
children.
here. We like, hello, we want to save the kids, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, here we are. We want to help the people. We want to, and that's why, you and I are both here today, is to talk about helping the people, and everybody just wants to be happy, healthy, and to be loved and accepted. And so when we come at everything from that perspective, I think it fixes so many problems, to just come at everything from how can I understand you? How can I help you? And I love you as another human being.
I know we're about to run, but
You're good.
one of the things that I wanted to say is Jesus said, when you pray, he doesn't say if you pray, pray in secret, and your Father
Mm,
will bless you openly. So, what is the
also an
secret prayer?
option.
What does a secret prayer look like? Right? Is it the one that is in the middle of the boardroom, raise their hands up in the air, it's sweating, pounding on the table?
Which I have seen. This is a thing that actually happens, people.
So, if we pray in secret, then if we pray the way that we're expected to pray. But if we're praying, looking, seeking attention, so we have to decide what is our attachment to. Are we praying for us,
Right.
or are we praying to initiate controversy?
Right.
Because if we're
Ooh.
praying to,
Ooh. That's a
the
good
Bible
point.
says, be mindful of the, look not onto your own affairs, but be mindful of the affairs of others. Look out
Ooh.
for other people's affairs. Think about other people, not just in your faith,
That's right. All the other people. But that's a
all other
good
people.
point about the controversy. I had not thought about that in a very long time, that I have seen this used, and the bringing up of religion used to quote poke the bear, right? To to
Yeah,
to stir a fire. And different religions. I'm not putting this all on one religion, but I have seen this in the workplace too. And I think that it can be used as a way to bully, and as a way to try to make yourself look big and strong, and all of this. Um and it's not the attitude. So, in kind of, that was a good point. Thank you. I think, kind of, with, in conclusion, it's, first of all, this is very internal. This is why I had you on, to bring in the very internal aspect, right? Look at yourself. Are you actually following your religion? Are you living the life that your religion actually intends you to live, by showing love and kindness and acceptance and all of this? And then the professional side, also, from the company side, and all of that, it's inclusion, not infliction. And there are always ways to accommodate, and it's reasonable accommodation, and always be willing to reasonably accommodate. And remember that religion is not the best topic at work, as we discussed. That can get a little heated. That's really not the best place to have a debate or anything like that. But people can certainly feel free to mention their religion. Like, if they say, I was at church this weekend and we had this great, thing, and it was part of my weekend. Great. Okay, cool. You mentioned it. No big deal. But avoid preaching things like that at work. Not the right place for that. Um, And I did love how much you brought in the very personal aspect. That was fantastic. Thank you. And then going inside. So as people might want to reflect after this very controversial episode of Career Lunch Live, talking about religion at work, um, is in for any religion, not just Christianity, as people are reflecting internally about how to embrace others of other faiths, what would be your advice to them?
Render to Caesar unto Caesar. That's what Jesus said. They was talking about taxes, like that's not his. So if you're working in an environment, if you sign up to work in an environment that doesn't allow you to exercise your faith, then you have to be honest,
Mm,
because we are truth tellers, right? And you have to say
hopefully.
either I can take this job or I can't take this job. So the hallmark, the marks of the early church, and this is going to be real quick. When the early church was being afflicted, they were being beaten, they was being the Roman um, Empire, when they had children that was being homeless or widowed and they needed somewhere to go, they would bring them to the church. They would abuse the people, but they brought them to the church because they said that the church was loving.
Yeah. And see,
And even though
that's
we
it,
was abusive to them, they will not be abusive to our children.
right? And what a powerful message. And I think that could ring true to a lot of political issues happening right now
Yes,
as well. But
love.
um, love and come at all of it from being a good human and from love and from trying to understand each other, because that's how we avoid all this ugliness that's out there. And please understand that if you're not coming at things from a perspective of love, and if you feel, hate or anger towards another group, you're part of the problem. Sorry to be the one to tell you, but you're part of the problem. So this is something that we can all choose. It's something that we can all change. And I encourage everyone to do that. I want to thank you so very much for joining me today, NaRon. This is a tough topic. It is a very personal topic to a lot of people. And I just want to say, from my perspective, just to make my views very, very clear, I embrace and love every religion out there. I think they're all beautiful and wonderful. They have so much to teach us. And I love all the humans. Well, not the ones that are jerks, but basically, if you're not a jerk, you're just really. I love you to death. I love the jerks too. But I love you. I support you. I believe in full inclusion. Everybody knows my stance on that. Highly support, the LGBTQIA community, all of this, the neurodiverse, the disability community, whatever race you are, religion, creed, multiculturalism. As long as you're not a horrible, awful human that's harming other people, I believe in inclusion. I do. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Same time, same place. Less controversial topic next week. We're very excited. Same time, same place. See you next week. Be great, everybody.